Nevertheless, rats were still being studied for signs of nicotine withdrawal in 1994. Well, I looked up that reference, and it wasn't to see if rats can become addicted to nicotine. What it was it was a test to see if a drug called I can't say this right. Thank you. Whether it can interfere with nicotine addiction. And that was done in 1994. And as a matter of fact, a year later, they moved on to clinical trials in humans. That representation that Dr. Greek did, he took, he didn't think people was going to go and look that reference up. Well, I did, and it didn't say what he said it did. Okay, listen to here's a debate in 2002, between Dr. Greek and Dr. Robert Spaff. It doesn't work. Well, Dr. Greek corrected, or Dr. Spaff said that many veterinary medicines are human medicines because of the similarities. Human beings and animals or pets share about 200 of the same diseases. Well, Dr. Greek said, well, they're only using human medicines because no pharmaceutical company will invest any money to develop drugs that they don't have to. There's no money in coming out with new drugs. Well, just look at all the current dog vaccines available. There's something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, about 11 different vaccines that are just developed for cats and dogs. And this is something that's new. Now, Dr. Greek's wife is a veterinary doctor. Why doesn't he know this? Here's a new tablet for dogs, 1 a month, and it prevents fleas. It interferes. It's a new novel drug, interferes with chitin, formation of chitin. Insects use their exoskeleton is made out of chitin. The flea drinks the blood, gets the enzyme, the inhibitor, can't make chitin, the eggs are sterile. And they've got an injection once every 6 months for cats. Now I can go on with numerous other examples of how he's misrepresenting the facts. This is not science. This is, here's this was a good one. Maybe I'll get to it. Oh no, I don't get it well. But maybe the question and answer period. And I can't play sound. Well, I wanted to play you what Dr. Jerry Vlasic, associate of Dr. Greek's, said at an animal rights conference, where there's an incredible, chilling soundbite where he's recommending the assassination of animal researchers. Not lower ones, but the higher up ones. Send a message to stop this. Well, Dr. Vlasic has been a partner of Dr. Greek. And in fact, he was your science advisor, I believe. In fact, as of last summer, your newsletter has him listed as a science advisor. This man and his wife have been barred from Great Britain because he's a danger. I don't have time to show you all the other people that are associated with Peter, that work for Peter, that work for PCRM, who are involved with arson, who support arson, violence, intimidation. This is all a plot to stop people from abusing animals in their minds. Thank you.
Dr. Greek, you now have 5 minutes for everybody.
Thank you very much. Well, first let me thank Mr. Skolnick for agreeing to participate in this debate. As I listened to his arguments, though, I got the feeling that we were attending 2 different debates. To begin with, I represent Americans for Medical Advancement, okay? We are an organization that is a patient advocacy group. We have in our mission statement, which you can find on the internet, that if animal experiments cure humans, we're all in favor of it. Okay? The board is comprised of 6 individuals, 5 out of 6 eat meat, wear fur, and hunt. So to confuse us purposefully or not with an animal rights group such as PETA or PCRM, I think is slightly disingenuous. We oppose all illegal activities. We don't just oppose violence, we oppose illegal activities in mass. We oppose the whole thing. Yes, Dr. Vlasic was on our scientific advisory board, and he was recently fired. As a matter of fact, we fired him before he made his outrageous statements about violent activities because we thought he was going in the wrong direction. So if you can condemn us because of past company that we have kept and fired, I guess that's up to you. The other theme, I guess, if you will, is that we're somehow part of the animal rights movement. Again, when 5 out of 6 of your board members eat meat and wear fur, I don't see how you get that. But let me just say this. If we were to veto every idea that had a fringe or lunatic supporter, no idea would ever be taken seriously. And I mean, clearly, a lot of the animal rights movement love what it is that we do. I wish they loved us enough to donate their money, but they don't. One reason the vested interest groups choose invective instead of explanation is that they have no scientific support for their position. Now, you'll notice that I did use references in my talk. For example, when I talked about the National Cancer Institute saying they lost cures for cancer, that had a reference in Science, which you can go and look up. And our books have over 1,000 references to peer-reviewed scientific journals. And I implore you, please, look them all up and come to your own decision about whether or not we've been honest. I stand by every statement we've made. By using the phrase animal rights activist in the same diatribe about animal models, vested interest groups seek to avoid engaging in true debate and instead imply that those who disagree with them are anti-science, inflexible, irrational, anti-human, and so forth. With regards to the polio vaccine and some of the other things that Mr. Skolnick said, we had some disagreements, but not really. No one seriously claims that animals were used as causal analogical models in the development of the polio vaccine. Where they were tried as CAMs, they failed. For example, one vaccine was developed in the 1930s based on using monkeys as CAMs, and children ended up losing their sense of smell for the rest of their life. I've actually met someone who was involved in that study. In terms of them, animal models delaying the polio vaccine, I wasn't alive then, okay? I had no first-hand knowledge. Al Sabin, I think, has first-hand knowledge. And again, if you go to our books or our website, you'll find a reference from the congressional record, okay, where Al Sabin's testified under oath before Congress, raised his right hand and said, quote, or I shouldn't say it's a quote, he said that animal models delayed the polio vaccine for decades. Hey, if he says it, I believe him. Now, when the polio vaccine was finally produced, you remember in numbers 3 through 9 that I had on the board, you can use animal parts. And that's how the polio vaccine was produced. It was produced using kidney tissue from monkeys. I mean, I'll give you that. That's not our argument. Our argument is that you cannot use them to test drugs and study human disease. Just a couple of things. We don't give nitrous oxide to babies, Mr. Skolnick. Nitrous oxide is something that I, as an anesthesiologist, give to people who don't want to be awake anymore. We give them nitric oxide. Nitric oxide was, again, an example of something that was discovered in the aorta of a pig. Now, if you don't know the difference between nitrous oxide and nitric oxide, that doesn't impress me. Cancer mortality rates. Yes, cancer mortality rates are coming down. Not because of treatments, because of 2 reasons. Number 1, people are stopping the habit of smoking. And number 2, we're diagnosing their disease earlier. We're not curing them. We're not curing anybody of cancer. I shouldn't say this is a sweeping generalization, but by and large, we're not curing cancer. I mean, I don't think I need to defend that point. This really gets down to the canary in the coal mine. I think that's an excellent example. In the 1930s, if I was going into the coal mine, I'd want that canary on my shoulder. I wouldn't want him on your shoulder, because we might be 10 feet away from each other. So using the canary in 1930 was a very viable thing to do. Today, if I went into the coal mine, I'd want a transcutaneous PCO2 monitor, a PO2 monitor, and a PCO monitor. And so that's what you can do. You know, in the old days, we used canoes to cross oceans, and you still can. I mean, that's what the look you're going for. Good luck to you. We can also use the Concorde, or at least we could until they retired it. Phase 1 clinical trials, the actual number is 5 out of 100 drugs that pass safety tests in animals and go on to phase 1 clinical trials in humans. 5 out of 100 make it to the market. Now, I don't care, we can have an argument about what are animals used for in drug testing. But if your batting average is 5 out of 100, man, that's not good. That's not good if you're playing hockey, okay? So that's just not a good thing. Lastly, if I can get through it, Mr. Skolnick did show us some so-called victories from using the animal model, but these are really a Potemkin village. It's an impressive facade that hides an undesirable fact or state. Now, he did present some interesting, albeit misleading anecdotes, but the plural of anecdote, even if these anecdotes were true, is not data. And science is concerned with data. And I think you'll notice the difference in our two presentations. I mean, I gave you a very scientifically oriented, probably over somebody's head, some of it was even over my head, debate. So the question when you use anecdotes is this a fair presentation of the general case? And what I tried to do is give you the scientific theory along with some empirical data from peer-reviewed journals that supported my case. I don't think my opponent did that. Also, in arguing for the importance of animal models, he used a shotgun strategy, and I don't have time to pick out everything that was wrong with every one of them. I just don't have the time. But to give a couple of examples where a certain animal species reacted similarly to humans, and from those limited examples to conclude the animal model as a paradigm is viable, is the fallacy of bloated conclusions. It would be like profiling several lottery winners and concluding that playing the lottery is the best way to save for retirement. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And when I was listening to Andrew Skolnick's presentation, one of the things that spoke to me a bit is that animal trials are not used to prove the efficacy, I think this was what his position, of drugs, but they're used to narrow down or to perhaps weed out what trials should go into clinical trials, that it's really clinical trials that prove the efficacy of drugs. And I wonder if you could speak to that and clear that up or say how that's relevant to this.
Sure, thanks for the question. Animal trials, if you read the drug company's propaganda, are done for one reason and one reason only, and that's to save the general public from death. Okay? And even if you read Nature Review Drug Discovery, Nature, the pharmacology journals, and so on, they're very blunt about that. So I don't know where this concept came from that we test on animals, use vis-a-vis drug testing, to get an idea or to use it as a heuristic. If there's one place that animals are used as cams and are meant to be predicted, it's in drug testing. Now, where the confusion arises sometimes is that the animal testing stage is sometimes done first, and that's when we talk about phase 1 human clinical trials. And that's the data that I talk about when I say 100 drugs enter phase 1 clinical trials and 95 of them fail. That's really what animal testing is for. It's to protect those people in phase 1, 2, and 3 clinical trials. Okay? Now, they would also like it to protect the people in the general public when the drug is marketed, but it's a distinction without a difference. Because if you feel safe taking a drug or that was part of 100 that got weeded down to 5, I mean, that's just not a good batting average. And you have to flip that argument on its head. Remember, the National Cancer Institute says we think we've lost cures for cancer. Well, I think Mr. Skolnick's data is roughly correct. You know, you do get 250 drugs to animals, and from the animals, you know, you're left with 100. What makes you think those other 150 weren't a cure for breast cancer? You don't know. I mean, if the animal model as a predictor is so bad that at best you're getting 5 out of 100 right, that's terrible. And that's not just my opinion. Mark Levin, the CEO of Millennium Pharmaceutical, showed a real nice slide one time where he tested drugs on rats and on humans, and there was no predictive value whatsoever. It was like a coin toss. It was hepatotoxicity. But we can go into that further later if you want.
Well, let me show you why we do, and why we're required to do preliminary studies on laboratory animals before we do the studies on people. Here are some of the pictures that became evidence in the Nuremberg trials of the Nazi doctors. You may be surprised to know that the only modern country to totally outlaw animal experiments, animal studies, was Nazi Germany. Adolf Hitler in 1933 outlawed it. I'm not saying that that's the reason he turned to humans. He had other reasons to turn to humans. These were people whose lives were not worth living. These were the infirm, the mentally retarded, the handicapped, the Jews, the gypsies, the war prisoners, and anyone else that got in his way. Hyperthermia experiments where these Nazi doctors submerged people in ice water until they died. Then they used to do research for pilots, their Luftwaffe pilots bailing out at high altitudes. They put prisoners into decompression chambers. And this was a cute one where they just starved the women and then removed their genitalia, the ovaries, and sent them to the universities for study. Out of the Nuremberg, out of the Nazi Holocaust and the Nuremberg trial came a code that the judges at the Nuremberg trial drew up that defined what is ethical for human experimentation. Number 3 states, the experiments should be so designed and based on the results of animal experimentation and a knowledge of the natural history of the disease or other problem under study, that the anticipated results will justify the performance of the experiment. And from the Nuremberg Code, which was written in 1949, in 1964 and modified several times, the latest in 1983, and accepted by the World Medical Assembly, which represents over 80, the medical societies of over 80 nations. They drafted the Helsinki Declaration, moving, I don't know if I have it now. It moved the rule to number 1, all human experiments to be ethical must be done based on a thorough review of the medical literature, the scientific literature, and after properly conducted animal studies. That has been the basis of our laws and the laws of most countries. That's why we do the studies. Dr. Greek in his book says, well, it's the greedy pharmaceutical companies, they don't want to be sued, so they're going to do these animal studies so they can defend themselves in court. Well, that's nonsense. Anyone who follows litigation with drugs knows that toxicology studies, preclinical studies with animals will not save the drug company. A great example is Vendectin. This was the most well-studied drug in pregnancy. Am I out of time? Oh, I'm sorry.